Back to our top story now, President Putin's State of the Nation address. Well, let's get more perspective on the president's speech, in which he said that Russia's not seeking to dominate the world and is capable of defending itself to protect its values. Let's talk more about this with Russian affairs analyst Martin McCauley. He's live in London. Martin, what do you make of President Putin's talk of preserving the traditional values for his country?
Well, one commentator said that Russia's had no ideology under President Putin, and now there's a new one called conservatism, which basically is Russian traditional values, the values of the family, Russian Orthodox Church, and so on, and really rejecting what people in the West would say are normal human rights, like gay rights and all those things. So therefore, Russia, if you like, is in fact saying it has its own culture, its own traditions and so on. It will not go the way of the West. It rejects the way the West is going, the way society is going in the West, and they want to keep their traditional values. And that's very important for Russians.
What about foreign policy? He talked about moving Russia forward and yet stressed he doesn't want to rule the world. What does he exactly mean by that? Where does he really stand here? Particularly bearing in mind Russia's fairly strong position recently on the diplomatic scene.
Yes, there have been very considerable diplomatic successes, such as Syria, Iran, and you have Gulf states and other states in the Middle East saying that if the United States is leaving the Middle East, then they've got to look to Russia, perhaps for protection and so on. So that's very good news for Russia. Russia is a hegemon, or Russia would like to be a great power and so on. Nobody rules the world anymore. The center of power, there's one in China, there's one in America and so on. And in Europe, Germany is the strongest power and so on. So therefore, Russia is up among the leaders. And Russia is saying we have to be listened to. Obviously, Russia is a member of the Security Council, has a veto and so on. It's a very important member of the G8 and the G20 and so on. So Russia, from a foreign policy point of view, is doing in fact very well. And saying we are here. Nobody can threaten us. He talked about the military aspect. Nobody can threaten us, and they shouldn't try.
Let's talk about that military threat in terms of the anti-missile defense system for Europe, saying, of course, the Iranian threat has now subsided after the recent success of those talks, and yet the US is still pushing forward with that missile shield in Europe. Putin sees this as a threat, but should he?
Well, he's always said that, and the Russians have never believed the shield was really against Iran. They see it as really a shield against themselves. And this is not, he hasn't said this for the first time, they've been saying this for the last 10 years, that NATO is a threat. If you look at from a military point of view, Russia sees NATO as the greatest threat. But if you talk to Russians and if you think about the geopolitical position of Russia, the power on the horizon, the looming power on the horizon is China. And the interesting thing is that there's nothing in the speech really about the rising power of China. In other words, it's sotto voce, you don't talk about things like that. And perhaps the economic incentives for businesses, small businesses, to go to the Russian Far East, Siberia and so on, that is an indicator that there is a problem in the Far East and that more Russians should go there, because if they don't, it's possible that China will expand its influence there. Right,
we must talk quickly about Ukraine. Obviously, the crisis ongoing there. Relations between the EU and the US and, of course, Moscow, very strained over this. How do you think Putin's going to react to this latest pressure we're seeing from the US and the EU on Yanukovych? He's now saying he's going to now perhaps look again at starting these negotiations and, indeed, join that agreement. So where does Putin stand there?
Well, he in the speech made a very strong case for Ukraine joining the customs union, to join Belarus and Kazakhstan, Russia and Ukraine. That would be a very, very considerable customs union. But of course, Yanukovych is in a weak economic position. Russia can give Ukraine incentives such as a lower price for its gas and so on. But Yanukovych, as a diplomat, will say, to take some of the teeth or the fangs out of the protests and say, okay, we'll start negotiating again with the EU, not by giving in or not, we can drag out these negotiations. But from his point of view, Yanukovych's point of view, he can say, okay, then we'll go along with some of these demands and so on. and we're going to make up our own minds. Ukraine is going to make up its own mind. The trouble with Ukraine is it's split, irredeemably split between the West, which wants to go towards the EU, and the East and the South towards Russia. So therefore it's a country divided, and Yanukovych has to bring the two sides together. He may in fact in the end say the East and the South have the majority, and we're going to go with Russia in the short term. But as a diplomat, he'd say, no, we can negotiate with the European Union and drag out these negotiations.
Martin, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us live there from London. Author and Russian affairs analyst
you.
Martin McCauley, live on RT. Thanks.
Thank you.